My name is Diane, and I am 54 years old. For 3 long years, my daughter Claire vanished from our lives. No calls, no texts, nothing but silence that echoed through our empty house every single day. Then one April morning, I found a letter in our mailbox. Her handwriting. My heart nearly burst with joy, and I reached to tear it open immediately. But my wife Maggie grabbed my arm and said, "Wait." I asked, "What is wrong?" She pointed at the envelope and whispered, "Can you not see?" I looked closer and my blood ran cold. Before I tell you what we discovered hidden in that letter, I want to know where you are watching from today. Please take a moment to hit like and subscribe so you do not miss what happens next. Because what my wife noticed in that envelope changed everything and possibly saved my daughter's life. Let me take you back to the beginning, to a time when our family was whole and our hearts were full of nothing but hope and love. I met Margaret, who I have always called Maggie, when we were both 30 years old. She was a detective with the Minneapolis Police Department, sharp as a tack and tough as nails on the outside, but underneath that badge beat the kindest heart I have ever known. I was a high school English teacher spending my days trying to convince teenagers that Shakespeare was actually interesting. We came from different worlds, but somehow we just fit together like 2 pieces of a puzzle nobody knew was missing. Our love story was not a whirlwind romance. It grew slowly, carefully, like a garden we tended together through every season. By the time we got married, we had been together for 2 years and knew each other's souls inside and out. Our families supported us, which was a blessing we never took for granted. Both sets of parents came to our wedding and my mother cried happy tears, while Maggie's father gave a toast that made everyone laugh and weep at the same time. But there was one thing missing from our life together: a child. We went through the adoption process when we had been married for 5 years. It was long and exhausting and filled with paperwork that seemed to multiply every time we turned around. But we never gave up because we knew there was a child out there who needed us as much as we needed her. That child was Claire. She came to us when she was just 2 years old, a tiny thing with big brown eyes and curly hair that stuck up in every direction. Her biological parents had been drug addicts who could not care for her, and she had spent the first 2 years of her life being shuffled through the foster care system. When the social worker placed her in my arms for the first time, she looked up at me with those enormous eyes, and I knew. I just knew she was meant to be ours. Maggie and I poured everything we had into giving Claire the life she deserved. We read to her every night, took her to the park every weekend, enrolled her in dance classes and art classes, and anything else she showed the slightest interest in. We wanted her to know that she was loved beyond measure, that being adopted did not make her any less our daughter. And Claire flourished. She grew into the most remarkable young woman, smart as a whip just like Maggie, creative and passionate about words just like me. She excelled in school, made friends easily, and had a smile that could light up the darkest room. By the time she was 18, she had been accepted to the University of Wisconsin with a full academic scholarship. She wanted to be a journalist, to tell stories that mattered, to give voice to people who had none. I remember driving her to campus that first day of college. Maggie was in the passenger seat pretending she was not crying behind her sunglasses. Claire sat in the back practically vibrating with excitement. When we helped her move into her dorm room, she hugged us both so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. "I am going to make you proud," she whispered. "I promise." "You already have, sweetheart," I told her. "You already have." Those first 2 years of college were wonderful. Claire called us every single day, sometimes twice. She would ramble on about her professors and her classes and the friends she was making. She joined the student newspaper and started writing articles that her professors praised as some of the best undergraduate work they had seen. During her sophomore year summer, she landed an internship at a local newspaper, and they offered her a job after graduation before she even finished. Everything was going exactly according to plan. Our daughter was living her dream, and we were so proud we could barely stand it. But then in her junior year, something changed. The daily phone calls became every other day, then twice a week, then once a week. When I would ask Claire if everything was okay, she would brush me off saying she was just busy with classes. Maggie noticed it before I did. She would sit at the kitchen table after Claire hung up her detective's eyes, narrowed her coffee growing cold in her hands. "Something is off," she would say. "I can feel it." But I did not want to hear it. I told myself Claire was just growing up, becoming more independent. That was what college was supposed to do, right? Prepare our children to live their own lives. I convinced myself that the distance was natural, healthy even. I had no idea how wrong I was. It was October of Claire's junior year when she first mentioned Derek. She called one evening and her voice sounded different. Lighter, somehow giddier. She told us she had met someone. His name was Derek Lawson. He was 28 years old, and he worked as a financial advisor at a big firm in Madison. He was successful, she said. Handsome, charming. He treated her like a queen. I felt a small knot form in my stomach at the age difference. 7 years was not insignificant when one person was still in college and the other was nearly 30. But I pushed the feeling aside. Claire was an adult, and I trusted her judgment. She was smarter than most people twice her age. Maggie, however, was not so easily convinced. "What do you know about him?" she asked Claire over the phone, her voice deceptively casual. I recognized that tone. It was the same one she used when interrogating suspects. "What do you mean? What do I know about him?" Claire's voice turned defensive immediately. "I know he loves me. I know he takes care of me. Why are you interrogating him, Mom?" The word hit Maggie like a slap. Claire had never spoken to her like that before, with that edge in her voice, that accusation lurking beneath the surface. "I am not interrogating anyone," Maggie said carefully. "I am just asking questions. That is what mothers do." "Well, you do not need to. Derek is wonderful. You will see." After she hung up, Maggie sat in silence for a long time. I tried to reassure her, telling her that Claire was just excited about her new relationship, that young love made people defensive. But deep down, something felt different about this conversation. Something felt wrong. We met Derek for the first time at Thanksgiving. Claire brought him home, and I tried to keep an open mind. He was tall and good-looking, with dark hair slicked back and expensive clothes that screamed money. He brought gifts, a bottle of wine that probably cost more than our weekly grocery budget, and a bouquet of roses so large I could barely find a vase big enough. He shook my hand firmly and looked me straight in the eye and told me how much he had heard about me. All the right words, all the right gestures. But something about him made my skin crawl, and I could not figure out why. During dinner, I started to notice things. Small things that most people would probably overlook. The way Derek's hand was always on Claire's shoulder or her arm or her back, like he was constantly reminding everyone that she belonged to him. The way he would answer questions directed at Claire before she could open her mouth. The way Claire would look at him before saying anything, as if seeking permission. At one point, Claire started telling a funny story about something that had happened in her journalism class. She was laughing, her old self shining through, and I felt my heart warm. But then Derek interrupted. "Babe, they do not want to hear about that," he said smoothly. Tell them about the trip we are planning instead." Claire's smile flickered, just for a second. Then she nodded and changed the subject. I glanced at Maggie across the table. Her jaw was tight, her eyes fixed on Derek with an intensity I had not seen since her detective days. That night, after Claire and Derek had gone to bed in the guest room, Maggie and I sat in the kitchen. "Something is off about him," Maggie said quietly. "I do not trust him." "Why?" I asked, though I already knew. I just did not want to admit it. Maggie listed everything she had observed. The way Derek controlled the conversation, the way he touched Claire, constantly marking his territory, the way Claire seemed to seek his approval before speaking. "Those are signs, Diane," Maggie said, her voice heavy. "I have seen them before. Too many times. In domestic violence cases." I felt a chill run down my spine, but I shook my head. "You are being paranoid. It is your job making you see things that are not there. Claire is happy. She would tell us if something was wrong." Maggie looked at me with sadness in her eyes. "Would she? Or is she already too deep to see it herself?" I did not answer. I did not have one. After Thanksgiving, Claire's calls became even less frequent. When I would try to reach her, she rarely picked up. Text messages went unanswered for days. When we did manage to talk, the conversations were brief and surface level, and I could always hear Derek in the background asking who she was talking to. I tried to tell myself it was normal. Couples spent time together. Claire was busy with school and her relationship. But the knot in my stomach grew tighter with each passing week. One evening I called Claire just to hear her voice. She answered after several rings, sounding distracted. "Hi, Mom. Now is not really a good time." "I just wanted to check in, sweetheart. I miss hearing from you." I know. I have just been really busy." In the background, I heard Derek's voice sharp and demanding. "Who is that?" "It is just my mom," Claire said, her voice suddenly smaller. "Tell her you will call back." I have to go, Mom. I will talk to you later." "Okay." "Claire, wait. Is everything okay? You can tell me anything you know, that right?" There was a pause. A long one. And for just a moment I thought she was going to say something real, something true. But then Derek's voice came again, closer this time, impatient. And Claire said, "Everything is fine. Bye, Mom." The line went dead. I put down the phone and looked at Maggie, who had been listening from across the room. "He is isolating her," she said quietly. "Classic pattern." This time I did not argue. The call that shattered everything came in March of the following year. I dialed Claire's number to ask about her graduation plans. She was supposed to finish her degree in a few months, and I wanted to discuss the ceremony, the celebration we had been planning for years. My little girl walking across that stage diploma in hand, ready to take on the world. She answered on the third ring, and her voice was different, cold, distant, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. "I am not graduating," she said flatly. "I dropped out." The words did not compute. I stood there in our kitchen phone pressed to my ear, trying to make sense of syllables that seemed to have lost all meaning. Why you were so close? Just a few more months. Derek thinks I do not need a degree. He makes enough money for both of us. He says I should focus on us, on our home. He is going to take care of everything. I gripped the counter to steady myself. "Claire, listen to me. You have worked so hard for this. Your degree, your career, your dream of being a journalist. You cannot just throw it all away." "I am not throwing anything away." Her voice grew harder. "I am making a choice. Derek says you never supported our relationship. He says you and Mom Maggie think you are better than him because he did not go to college." "That is not true," I said desperately. We just want what is best for you. We love you, Claire. We have only ever wanted you to be happy and successful." "Derek makes me happy," she snapped. "Why is that not enough for you? Why can you not just be happy for me?" "I am trying, sweetheart. I just do not understand why you have to give up everything you worked for." "Because I want to. Because Derek knows what is best for us. Something you clearly do not understand." The conversation spiraled from there. I said things I regretted. She said things that cut deep. And then suddenly Derek's voice was on the line, smooth and cold as ice. "Your daughter has made her choice. Respect it." I was so shocked I could barely speak. "Put Claire back on the phone. I am not done talking to her." "She does not want to talk to you. You upset her." "She is my daughter. I have a right to speak with her." "Actually, you do not. She is an adult, and she has decided she needs some space from you. I suggest you give it to her." Maggie had come into the kitchen by then, drawn by the raised voices. She took the phone from my shaking hands. "Put my daughter on the phone," she said in her detective voice, the one that had made hardened criminals confess. "Right now." Derek laughed. Actually laughed. "She is not your daughter. You adopted her. Big difference." I saw Maggie's face go white, then red. In all our years together, I had never seen her look so furious. "Listen to me very carefully," she said through gritted teeth. "If you hurt her, if you so much as touch a hair on her head, I will find you, and you will regret it." "Is that a threat? Detective, should I report you?" "It is a promise." The line went dead. Maggie and I stood there in the sudden silence of our kitchen, holding each other, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My daughter, my Claire, the baby I had held in my arms and sworn to protect forever, was gone. And some man I barely knew had taken her from us. From that moment on, Claire never answered our calls again. Our texts went unreturned, our emails bounced back undelivered. I wrote letters to her apartment address, but they came back stamped "Return to Sender." A month later, we drove to Madison to find her. When we got to the apartment where she had been living, no one answered the door. A neighbor told us the couple had moved out weeks ago. She did not know where they had gone. Maggie used every connection she had from her years on the force. She called in favors, searched databases, reached out to colleagues in other states. But Derek had covered his tracks well. He had deleted all of Claire's social media accounts, changed her phone number, made her vanish as if she had never existed at all. 3 years passed like that. 3 years of silence. 3 years of not knowing if my daughter was alive or dead, happy or suffering, free or trapped. Every birthday I sent a card to her old address, knowing it would never reach her. Every Christmas we wrapped presents for her and put them under the tree, hoping against hope that this would be the year she came home. Every night I prayed for her safety, for her freedom, for some sign that she was still out there somewhere. I fell into a depression that nearly swallowed me whole. Some days I could not get out of bed. Others I would sit in her old room holding her childhood stuffed animals, weeping until I had no tears left. I started seeing a therapist just to survive the grief. Maggie never stopped searching. Even after retiring from the force, she spent hours every day trying to find Claire. But Derek was good at disappearing. He had done this before we later learned. He knew how to vanish. 3 years of hoping. 3 years of despair. 3 years of wondering if I would ever see my daughter again. And then that April morning, a letter arrived. I remember every detail of that day. It was a Tuesday. The sky was gray, threatening rain, and there was still a chill in the Minnesota air that hinted at a winter reluctant to release its grip. I walked to the mailbox like I did every morning, not expecting anything but bills and advertisements, the usual junk that filled our lives with noise. But there among the circulars and credit card offers was a plain white envelope, handwritten address, no return address label, just a city name scrawled in the corner, Bozeman, Montana. And the handwriting. I would have recognized it anywhere. That familiar curve of letters, the way she crossed her T's and dotted her I's. It was Claire's writing. My daughter's hand had touched this paper. I must have made some kind of sound because Maggie came running out of the house still in her bathrobe. "What is it? What is wrong?" I held up the envelope with trembling hands. "It is from Claire. Maggie, it is from Claire." For a moment we just stared at it. This impossible thing, this miracle in paper form. After 3 years of silence, our daughter had reached out. I fumbled with the envelope, ready to tear it open right there on the sidewalk, desperate to devour whatever words waited inside. But Maggie grabbed my arm. "Wait." I looked at her confused, almost irritated. Why it is from our daughter. But Maggie was not looking at me. She was looking at the envelope with those detective eyes of hers, the ones that had solved hundreds of cases over 2 decades. She took the letter from my hands gently but firmly and held it up to the morning light. "Look at the handwriting," she said quietly. "Really look." I did not understand at first. It was Claire's writing. I would stake my life on it. But as I looked more closely, I started to see what Maggie saw. The letters were uneven, shaky. Some words were pressed hard into the paper while others were barely visible. This was not the confident flowing script of the Claire I remembered. This was the writing of someone whose hand was trembling, someone who was afraid. And then Maggie pointed to something else. "See how some letters are darker than others? Look at the pattern." I squinted at the envelope. She was right. Certain letters stood out, pressed more firmly into the paper, almost as if they were trying to separate themselves from the rest. Maggie pulled a small notepad from her robe pocket. Even in retirement, she always had one handy. Old habits. She started writing down the darker letters one by one. HELPMETRAPPED. Help me trapped. My knees buckled. Maggie caught me before I hit the ground. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Oh my God. She is trying to tell us something." We went inside and Maggie cleared the kitchen table. She put on her reading glasses and got out her magnifying glass, the one she used for examining evidence. Carefully, so carefully, she opened the envelope and spread the letter out before us. On the surface, it read like a normal letter. Claire apologized for the long silence. She said she was living with Derek on a small farm in Montana, and that life was peaceful and quiet. She said she was sorry for the way things had ended, and that she just needed some time. She hoped we could understand. She asked us not to worry about her because she was fine. It was the kind of letter that should have made us feel better, the kind that should have eased our fears. But Maggie kept reading, kept analyzing. She had spent 20 years decoding lies, finding truth hidden in places no one else thought to look. "Look at the first word of each paragraph," she murmured. "Count every third word in the first sentence of each section." I watched as she worked her pencil, scratching against paper, extracting meaning from what seemed like innocent text. And then she had it. The second message. He watches everything. Cannot call. Send help to Blue Ridge Farm. My hands flew to my mouth. Tears streamed down my face before I even realized I was crying. But Maggie was not done. She tilted the paper, examining every corner, every margin. And there in the bottom right corner, written so small it was almost invisible, were the words that broke me completely. "I am so sorry, Moms. I love you." I sobbed, great heaving sobs that shook my entire body. My daughter was trapped. She was being held prisoner by a man who had stolen her from us, and this letter was her desperate attempt to reach us, her last hope. Maggie held me for a moment, but only a moment. Then she stood up and I saw the transformation happen. She was no longer my wife, my partner, the woman who had helped me raise our daughter. She was Detective Margaret Hayes again, and she had a case to solve. "I am calling Patterson," she said, reaching for her phone. Patterson was her old contact in the FBI, someone she had worked with on several cases involving interstate crimes. "Explain the situation. Send the letter. He will understand." She did. And he did. Within an hour, he had confirmed what we already knew. This was a technique sometimes used by domestic violence victims to send hidden messages. Claire had somehow learned about it and had the courage to use it. But even with FBI involvement, these things took time. Proper channels, warrants, bureaucracy. Maggie was not willing to wait. "We are going to Montana," she said as she started packing a bag. "Tonight." I did not argue. I did not hesitate. I grabbed my own bag and started throwing in whatever I could find. Our daughter needed us. We were going to save her. We drove through the night, Maggie and I taking turns at the wheel. 14 hours of dark highways and deserted roads of gas station coffee and silent prayers. I watched the miles tick by on the odometer and tried not to think about what we might find at the end of this journey. Tried not to imagine the worst. Maggie was in full detective mode, making calls as we drove. She had contacted the sheriff's department in Bozeman, explained who she was and what we suspected. The sheriff was skeptical at first. A retired detective from Minnesota claiming her adopted daughter was being held captive on a farm based on hidden messages in a letter. It sounded crazy. Even I knew it sounded crazy. But Maggie had evidence. She had the letter, the decoded messages, Claire's history, and she had 20 years of credibility in law enforcement. Eventually, the sheriff agreed to meet us and assess the situation. We arrived in Bozeman just as the sun was coming up. The town was still quiet, wrapped in the gray light of early morning. We met Sheriff Martinez at a diner near the highway, and Maggie showed him everything. The letter, the decoded messages, photos of Claire from before Derek took her. He studied the evidence carefully, his weathered face revealing nothing. Then he looked up at us. "If what you are saying is true, this is serious. Kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment. These are federal crimes." "We know," Maggie said. "That is why we are here. That is why we need your help." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Blue Ridge Farm is about 15 miles outside of town. Remote property. The owners bought it about 2.5 years ago. Man and a woman. Keep to themselves. Never cause any trouble." "That is them," I said. "That is where our daughter is." Sheriff Martinez looked at me with something like sympathy in his eyes. "Ma'am, I understand you want to believe your daughter is in trouble, but I have to tell you from what we have seen, that couple seems normal. We have no reports of disturbances, no complaints from neighbors." "Because there are no neighbors," Maggie said sharply. "That is why he chose it. Total isolation. No witnesses." The sheriff sighed. "Look, I am not saying I do not believe you, but I cannot just storm onto private property without probable cause. I need more than a feeling." Maggie leaned forward. "You have a letter with hidden messages. You have a pattern of behavior consistent with domestic abuse and coercive control. You have a young woman who dropped out of college, cut off all contact with her family, and disappeared from public view. That is not a feeling, Sheriff. That is evidence." They went back and forth for another 20 minutes. I sat there, stomach churning, watching the clock on the wall tick away precious time. Every minute we spent talking was another minute Claire was trapped with that monster. Finally, Sheriff Martinez made a decision. "All right, I will come out there with you, but we do this by the book. If there is any sign of danger, any indication that the young woman is being held against her will, we act. But if everything looks normal, we leave. Agreed?" "Agreed," Maggie said. We drove out to Blue Ridge Farm in a small convoy. Maggie and I in our car, Sheriff Martinez and a deputy in their patrol vehicle hanging back half a mile to avoid alerting anyone. The farm was everything Maggie had predicted. Isolated. No neighbors in sight. A long dirt road leading to a weathered farmhouse surrounded by empty fields. There were bars on the windows. Not decorative. Functional. We parked at the end of the driveway and approached on foot. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Somewhere in that house was my daughter. I could feel her presence like a physical thing. Maggie knocked on the door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps, and the door swung open. Derek. He looked older than I remembered. Harder. His eyes flicked from Maggie to me and back again, and I saw recognition dawn followed quickly by something else. Anger. Fear. Both. "What are you doing here?" His voice was flat, controlled. "How did you find us?" "We are here for our daughter," Maggie said in a voice that could have frozen fire. "Step aside." Derek did not move. "She does not want to see you. She made that very clear 3 years ago." "Claire!" I shouted past him into the house. "Claire, we are here. Can you hear me?" "Keep your voice down," Derek hissed. "You are trespassing on private property. Leave now or I will call the police." "The police are already here," Maggie said, nodding toward the patrol car that was now pulling up the driveway. For just a second, I saw panic flash across Derek's face, but he recovered quickly, smoothing his features into a mask of calm concern. "This is ridiculous. My wife is fine. She does not want contact with you. That is her right." But Maggie was not listening to him anymore. She was looking past him into the dim interior of the house. "Claire," she called. "Claire, if you can hear me, make a sound. Any sound." Silence. Then a crash. Something falling, something breaking, and a voice, weak and distant but unmistakable. "Mom. Mom. Maggie." Derek spun around, started to move back into the house, but Maggie was faster. Years of training took over and she blocked his path, signaling to the sheriff. "We have confirmation," she said. "She is calling for us. That is probable cause." Sheriff Martinez moved in. His deputy was right behind him. Derek tried to argue, tried to explain, but no one was listening anymore. I pushed past all of them and ran into the house. "Claire, where are you?" "Back here, Mom. I am back here." I followed her voice down a narrow hallway past a kitchen that looked barely used to a door at the very back of the house. A door with a padlock on the outside. Someone had locked my daughter in a room. "Get this open!" I screamed. "Get this door open now!" The deputy came running with bolt cutters. One quick snap and the padlock fell away. I flung the door open, and there was Claire. My baby, my little girl, sitting on a bare mattress in a room with no windows, looking up at me with eyes that held 3 years of terror and hope. She was thin, so thin, Her hair was lank, her skin pale. There were bruises on her arms, faded but visible. But she was alive. "Mom," she whispered. And then I was holding her, and she was holding me, and we were both crying so hard we could barely breathe. Maggie came in seconds later and wrapped her arms around both of us, and the three of us clung to each other in that horrible little room while Derek was led away in handcuffs outside. "I'm so sorry," Claire kept saying between sobs. "I'm so sorry." "Shh," I murmured into her hair. "You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. We have you now. You are safe. You are going to be okay." And even though I did not know if that was true in that moment with my daughter in my arms again, I believed it with every fiber of my being. We took Claire to the hospital first. She was dehydrated and malnourished with multiple healed fractures that told a story of years of abuse. The doctors were horrified. The nurses were gentle, so gentle as they tended to her wounds, both visible and invisible. While Claire was being examined, Maggie worked with Sheriff Martinez and his team to document everything. The room where Claire had been kept, the locks on the doors, the bars on the windows, every piece of evidence that would be needed to put Derek Lawson away forever. They also searched his computer and found disturbing records. Communications with 2 other women from his past, evidence that Claire was not his first victim, just the first one whose family had refused to give up. When Claire was stable enough to talk, she told us everything. She sat in the hospital bed looking small and fragile against the white sheets, and she told us how Derek had slowly taken over her life. It started with small things. He would get jealous if she spent time with friends. He would sulk if she talked to her family too much. He would question every decision she made and then convince her that she needed his guidance. By the time she realized what was happening, it was too late. "He told me that you did not really love me," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said adopted children are never loved the same way as biological ones. He said you kept me out of obligation, not affection. He said I should be grateful that he actually wanted me." I felt like I had been stabbed through the heart. "That was a lie. Every word of it. We have loved you since the moment we saw you. You are our daughter in every way that matters." "I know that now," Claire said. "But back then he was so convincing. And the more he isolated me from everyone, the easier it was to believe him." She told us about the move to Montana, how Derek had convinced her it would be romantic, just the 2 of them in a farmhouse away from the noise of the world. By the time she realized it was a prison, there was no way out. He controlled everything: the phone, the car, the money. He monitored her, constantly checked her emails, listened to her conversations. If she stepped out of line, there were consequences. At first, it was just verbal abuse. Then came the physical violence. "I thought about running so many times," she said, "but I had no money, no phone, no way to contact anyone. The nearest town was 15 miles away, and I did not even know which direction. And he told me that if I ever tried to leave, he would kill me. And then he would find you and kill you too. I believed him." She cried as she told us about the years of captivity, the loneliness, the fear, the shame, and then finally the letter. "I remembered something Mom Maggie told me once," Claire said, looking at Maggie, "about how victims sometimes send coded messages. You were talking about a case and you mentioned how one woman saved her own life by writing a letter that looked normal but had a hidden cry for help. I never forgot that." Maggie reached out and took Claire's hand. "I never imagined you would need to use that information. When Derek said I could write one letter to prove I was okay, I knew it was my only chance. I spent weeks planning it. figuring out how to hide the message without him noticing. He read it before I sent it, but he did not see what you saw. He underestimated your mothers, I said with a small smile. Claire smiled back, the first real smile I had seen from her in years. Yes, he did. The legal process moved quickly after that. Derek was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment assault, and a host of other crimes. The FBI got involved because he had taken Claire across state lines. 2 other women came forward after seeing the news coverage telling their own stories of abuse at his hands. With all the evidence stacked against him, Derek's lawyers could not save him. The trial was hard. Claire had to testify, had to face him again in that courtroom, had to tell her story in front of strangers and cameras. But she did it. She stood up there and told the truth about what he had done to her, and she did not flinch. Not once. When the verdict came back guilty on all counts, I watched Claire close her eyes and take a deep breath. 20 years. That was his sentence. 20 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. "It is over," Maggie said, squeezing Claire's hand. "Is it?" Claire asked quietly. It was not over. Not really. The healing had just begun. Recovery was not a straight line. It was messy and painful and full of setbacks. Claire came home with us to Minneapolis, back to her old room with its purple walls and childhood posters still hanging where she had left them. But she was not the same girl who had left for college all those years ago. That girl was gone, replaced by someone older and more fragile, someone who flinched at loud noises and had nightmares every night. We got her the best therapist we could find, someone who specialized in trauma and domestic abuse survivors. The sessions were hard. There were days when Claire would come home and lock herself in her room and cry for hours. There were nights when I would hear her screaming in her sleep and run to hold her until the shaking stopped. But slowly, she started to heal. It took 6 months before she could sleep through the night without medication. 8 months before she could go outside alone without having a panic attack. A full year before the nightmares started to fade. Maggie and I were there for every step. We never pressured her, never pushed too hard. We let her set the pace, let her decide what she was ready for and when. All we did was love her, unconditionally, completely, the same way we had loved her since the day we brought her home. And our love was enough. It was not a magic cure, but it was a foundation. Something solid for Claire to stand on while she rebuilt herself piece by piece. After a year and a half, Claire made a decision. "I want to go back to school," she said one morning over breakfast. "I want to finish what I started." We supported her completely. She enrolled in a local university to complete her journalism degree, and this time nothing was going to stop her. She graduated with honors 2 years later, walking across that stage to receive her diploma just like we had always dreamed. But that was not all she did. Claire started writing about her experience. At first just in journals for herself, then in articles that she submitted to publications. Her story was picked up by a major magazine, and suddenly people were paying attention. Other survivors reached out to her. Women who had been through similar experiences, who saw themselves in her words, who felt less alone because she had been brave enough to share her truth. Claire responded to every single one of them. Within a few years, she had become an advocate, a voice for the voiceless. She started speaking at conferences, consulting with law enforcement agencies, working with organizations that help domestic abuse survivors escape and rebuild their lives. And then came the book. Claire called it The Hidden Message, and it was the story of her captivity and rescue told in her own words. She wrote about Derek and his manipulation, about the years of isolation and abuse, about the letter that saved her life, and the mothers who never gave up on her. The book became a bestseller. It helped countless women recognize the signs of coercive control and gave them the courage to seek help. It was translated into 12 languages and adapted into a documentary that aired on national television. I watched all of this unfold with a pride so deep it sometimes brought me to tears. My daughter, who had been through the worst kind of hell, had emerged not just as a survivor, but as a beacon of hope for others. Today, 5 years after her rescue, Claire is thriving. She is 30 years old. She has a career she loves, friends who support her, and a kind, gentle man named William who treats her with the respect she deserves. They are taking things slowly, which is wise. But when I see them together, I see joy in Claire's eyes. Real joy. The kind she had not known in far too long. Our family is whole again. Different than before, marked by the scars of what we went through, but whole nonetheless. Maggie and I are still together, still as in love as ever. Sometimes we sit on the porch in the evening and talk about the years when Claire was gone, the darkness that nearly consumed us both. We survived it because we had each other, and we got our daughter back because we refused to give up. Looking back now, I can see the lessons woven through every part of this story. The first lesson is about the signs we should never ignore. Derek did not become a monster overnight. The red flags were there from the beginning, if only I had been willing to see them. The jealousy disguised as love, the control masked as concern, the way he slowly cut Claire off from everyone who cared about her. These are the hallmarks of an abuser, and they are always there if you know where to look. Maggie saw them immediately. Her detective's instincts recognized the pattern. But I did not want to believe it. I made excuses. I told myself Claire was happy that she would tell us if something was wrong. I chose comfort over truth, and it nearly cost me my daughter. If someone you love is in a relationship that makes them disappear, that changes who they are, that separates them from family and friends, pay attention. Trust your instincts. Do not wait until it is too late. The second lesson is about never giving up. 3 years is a long time to search for someone who does not want to be found. There were days when hope seemed foolish, when despair felt like the only rational response. But Maggie never stopped looking. Even when every lead went cold, even when it seemed impossible, she kept trying. And because she did, we were there when Claire finally reached out. Parents, listen to me. If your child is lost to you, whether through an abuser or addiction or anything else that separates families, do not give up. Keep the door open. Keep reaching out. Keep believing that one day they will find their way back to you. They might send you a letter with a hidden message. They might call in the middle of the night. They might show up on your doorstep after years of silence. However it happens, whenever it happens, be ready. The third lesson is about forgiveness and freedom. For a long time after Claire came home, I was consumed by rage. Rage at Derek for what he had done. Rage at myself for not seeing it sooner. Rage at a world that allowed such cruelty to exist. I carried that anger like a stone in my chest, and it weighed me down. But anger is not healing. Holding on to hatred does not punish the person who hurt you. It only hurts you more. It took years, but I finally learned to let go. Not to forgive Derek exactly. Some things are beyond forgiveness. But to release the grip that my anger had on me. To accept what had happened and move forward instead of staying trapped in the past. Derek is in prison where he belongs. Claire is free and thriving. Maggie and I have our family back. These are the things that matter now. The rest is just noise. And so I share this story with you, not for sympathy or attention, but in the hope that it might help someone else. If you are watching this and you are trapped in a situation like Claire's, know that there is a way out. There are people who will help you. You are not alone. If you are watching this and you are worried about someone you love, trust your instincts. Do not ignore the signs. Reach out before it is too late. And if you are watching this and you have lost someone to an abuser, do not give up hope. Keep searching. Keep believing. Keep the door open, because sometimes even after 3 years of silence, a letter arrives. And if you look close enough, you might just see the message hidden inside. I want to leave you with a question. Have you ever had someone in your life who seemed to disappear after meeting a new partner? Did you recognize the signs? What did you do about it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else recognize danger in their own life. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss more stories like this one. Every share, every comment helps us reach more people who might be going through something similar. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you for caring about stories like mine. May you always recognize the hidden messages from those who love you. May you always have the courage to act when someone needs your help. And may your family, however it looks, be blessed with the kind of love that never gives up. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.